There are very few actions we can take that, according to the studies, seem to lead directly to longer life, especially when considering diet. Most of the studies are epidemiological. They have real data collection problems with surveys and things like that. And if you think about the nature of these surveys, it makes sense that it's really hard to find quality data. Because, for example, if I send you a survey asking how many times you ate bacon in the last year, do you remember? But there's one clear action when it comes to our eating that directly leads to a longer life, and it is eating less. In this video, I want to talk about our diets and these general rules that are healthy for the vast majority of people. Obviously, everyone's individual biology is so specific that when we talk about like the molecules you take into your body, you really need a specific plan that matches your body. But I find there are 3 general rules that work for all people, and the first one is this: eat less. Now, the first step here is it means we all need to know what our subsistence calories are. And there are calorie calculators online. It's really easy to find out. You go on, you take a short questionnaire telling your daily activity level, what gender you are, how big you are, stuff like that. And the model will spit out for you how many calories you need to eat to maintain your current body mass. For me, that's about 2,300 calories. I think my wife, it's something like 1,700 calories. And we only need a ballpark for this metric. Once you know that metric, your goal is simply to eat less than that most days. Now, there are different strategies for eating less, and I'll get to them. But the first thing I thought of when I realized this eating less is a real actual metric, and it's the only one within our diets that the current body of scientific knowledge shows us directly leads to longer life. This immediately made me question if Michael Pollan was spot on with his 3 rules he came out with in Omnivore's Dilemma. Michael Pollan's rules were: eat real food, not too much, and only plants. And I mostly agree with this idea. Eat real food, it's hard to see in the data studies exactly what effect this has on us, but certainly when we look at our evolution, we can see we've eaten real food that looks like the actual food source for hundreds of thousands of years. So it makes sense this would be healthy within our physiology today as well. So in thinking about eating real food, to me the only real metric is when you look at your food, can you tell what it was? There's some things that stretch this a bit. Meat doesn't really look like an animal, but we all know what that muscle tissue looks like, and meat kind of does look like muscle tissue, unless we grind it up and put it in things and do all kinds of crazy things with it. And that's the whole point. Eat real food means eat food that is processed the least. So cooking your food, probably a perfectly fine amount of processing. But potato chips are overly processed, and they really don't look like potatoes anymore, so it's easy to tell. If this is interesting, I'd really appreciate if you hit that like and subscribe. It'll just help me get this out to more people. So our first 2 rules: eat real food and not too much. I think those are great rules that all humans could live by. But this 3rd rule of mostly plants, I actually put under serious question. I don't think he's totally off. He was specifically looking at the Mediterranean diet. When you look at the Mediterranean diet, what you realize is people do eat meat, but in small quantities. When we look at the blue zones, 5 out of 6 of those blue zones are eating meat on a monthly basis, but in much smaller quantities than we are in the United States. The reason I'm hesitant to recommend that people go vegetarian is that we need a lot of protein in order to maintain our muscle mass. Now, women probably could go vegetarian and still get plenty of protein in their diets. But if a man goes vegetarian and is not very careful about his protein, then when you hit your 60s and 70s, that's a prescription for just yearly muscle loss and not being able to maintain that muscle. Our muscle is going to decay as we age regardless. So the goal is that when we hit that age that our muscle begins to decay, we need to have enough muscle mass that our muscle can decay and we still remain capable of doing the things we want to do. In order to maintain that muscle mass, what are the things we need to do? Well, we need to exercise regularly in order to get muscle mass, and we need to support that exercise with eating enough protein. So for me, the 3 simple rules are just eat real food, not too much, and consider your proteins. Along with considering your proteins, we should consider the amount of meat we eat. And if you're on the standard American diet, you're probably eating way too much meat. You might be surprised to find you could be eating too much meat and still not getting enough protein. There are many different protein sources, and we should be getting our protein from many different sources, not just meat. So how do we actually enact this plan? Well, it's actually quite easy. Eat real food. Every single thing you eat, just check in with yourself. Can you tell what that thing was when it started? Cooked vegetables still pretty much look like vegetables, so that's totally fine. Gummy snacks do not really look like any of their ingredients, so we should be very careful about them. The second rule, not too much. Well, first you just have to know your subsistence calories, and then you have to have a strategy that you're going to enact in order to try to control the amount of calories you eat. Well, there are 3 strategies for reducing your calories. The first one is simply calorie reduction. In order to do this well, you really have to keep a very specific food journal and you have to be very careful about your calories. And if you're capable of doing that, I think that's probably the best way to do it. But it's very time intensive, and personally, I find it really difficult to keep a quality food journal and to stay up with the components of all of the foods that I'm eating. This method would not work for you if you're good at doing it 5 days a week and then 2 days a week you eat whatever you want and don't write it down. You really have to be consistent every single day if you're going to take that first strategy of simply reducing calories. The second strategy for reducing the calories that we eat is reducing the number of foods that you eat. So if you're vegan, you probably are fine on consuming a small amount of calories because you just can't eat that many foods. If you're a Muslim practicing Ramadan, probably also you're fine in that category. There are a lot of things that you can't be eating, and on top of it, you have a time restriction. So just cutting out the foods that you eat will help you eat less. And if you're going to choose restricting the type of foods you eat, the first things we all really should be cutting out are refined sugars and refined flours. The third strategy for reducing the number of calories you eat is time-restricted eating, or intermittent fasting, which has become really commonly talked about these days. Well, according to the medical literature, the only thing that we actually can prove that we gain from time-restricted eating is restriction of calories. But that calorie restriction alone is enough that maybe we should all be considering intermittent fasting simply to control our calories. Now, the hard part, if you choose intermittent fasting, is you need to consider your protein. What I've read is that every time you consume protein, your body kind of has this window for how much protein it can process. So around the first 10 grams or so, your body actually processes as glucose. And then above that 10 grams, you're actually taking in protein. But if you're eating more than 55 grams or so, then again, your body processes that protein as glucose. So you have this window for the amount of protein you can get. For a person my size, I really need to get somewhere in the neighborhood of 120 to 180 grams of protein a day. So if I'm able to take in the maximum of 40 to 45 grams of proteins a day, I really need at least 3 and ideally 4 servings of protein. If I'm giving myself an 8-hour window to eat, well then I need to get 4 servings of protein in that 8-hour window. Beyond these 3 simple rules of eat real food, not too much, and consider your proteins, there are a wealth of things that could be great for your health, but I think they're much more individual and specific. So you really need a doctor to look at your blood work and make those prescriptions. I would just say these 3 rules are very healthy for the vast majority of people. And basically, if we want to live longer, all of us should be listening to these rules and taking them on. And if you're interested in more on similar topics, check out this video here. This is the Stoic Yogi, out.